The 2024 NFL draft class is almost done with their official rookie seasons. So in today's video, I want to go through every single pick of round number 1 and give those guys a letter grade as to how good they've been in their rookie year. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, but let's just hop right into it. Now, before we get into number 32, Xavier Legette, which by the way, we will be starting off with 32 and ending the video off with number 1. I can't go into detail about every single one of these players, but I will at least give a brief explanation for every single pick. If you want more details as to why I gave the player a pick or a certain grade, just put down a comment and I'll make sure to respond with it. But we are going to begin with at number 32, the Carolina Panthers actually traded back into the first round to pick up Xavier Legette. Xavier's been up and down this year. He's had a couple really nice plays here and there, but he's also had a couple really bad drops. I think he's going to end up being a really good player. Right now has less than 500 receiving yards, but I do think as time will go on, he will develop into being that full-time either receiver 1 or receiver 2 for this team. For right now, I'm only going to give this one a C, but I can easily see this becoming a really good pick in a few years. Then at number 31, the San Francisco 49ers decided to take Ricky Pearsall, which in my opinion was a little bit of a reach at the time, and I think looking back on the pick now, it hasn't particularly aged well. Now, I do want to say this, he did get freaking shot, so that's a miracle in and out of itself, but given the fact that we're just grading these draft picks for what they've done this year, he just hasn't really been the guy that this team really needed. And this is also the same team that has had injuries with Brandon Ayuk, inconsistencies from Deebo Samuel, and despite that, Pearsall really hasn't been a full-time active member of this roster, at least to this point. There are still a few weeks to end the season where potentially he could become a better draft pick, but for now, I'm going to have it as a D+, just simply because I haven't seen much from him. And then moving to number 30 with the Baltimore Ravens decided to take Nate Wiggins. He has been maybe the most inconsistent player of this draft class, though I'm sure I'll definitely say that phrase a couple times throughout the video. Nate Wiggins has just been really up and down. He's had some really good games, most recently against Malik Neighbors. He had a really nice day, but he's also had some days where he's looked really bad and kind of lost out there. I don't want to necessarily put a lot of the blame on him because there's also a first year defensive coordinator, so I do think maybe that does play into it a little bit, but Nate Wiggins hasn't been great nor bad, so I'm just going to put him at around a C+. Then at pick number 29, the Dallas Cowboys took Tyler Guyton. I didn't really love the pick at the time, and I still don't really love the pick. He has 16 penalties on the year and 5 sacks allowed. He's also missed some time with injuries. Now, I will say he is a developmental piece for the Dallas Cowboys, so he's got plenty of time to at least become something. The one positive that I will say about Guyton is that he has been on the field playing when healthy, so it's not like he's been so bad that they have benched him, but he hasn't been particularly good. I'm going to give this pick a C-. Next up at pick number 29 was the Kansas City Chiefs, who traded to get Xavier Worthy from Texas. Worthy, I kind of had a feeling this was going to be his rookie season. He hasn't necessarily been all that productive so far this year. He's had a couple nice plays here and there, has made some big explosive plays, but his play style I didn't think was going to translate to the NFL at least immediately, and that's kind of been the case. He isn't going to be a Tyreek Hill, which some people were comparing him to, but I will say he has been a really good player so far through his career. It just hasn't necessarily been great or anything like that. Again, he's made some really big explosive plays, and actually most recently he's had maybe his most productive weeks. These past 3 weeks he's had over 5 receptions in each week, so maybe he's building up to having a really good end to the season, which could potentially boost up his grade. But as of right now, I'm going to have this one as like a C+, bordering on a B-. Moving to pick 27, where the Arizona Cardinals took Darius Robinson. This one I feel like is unfair to pick because he did not play a whole bunch this year because of injuries, though he's come back the past couple weeks and has been okay so far. So because of that, there's really not a whole bunch to talk about here. I'm going to give this one a C, but at the same time, you could also just give it a no grade because he just hasn't played much. Moving on to pick 26, which the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took Graham Barton. The pick at the time made a bunch of sense, and so far it's played out pretty dang well for the Buccaneers. Has he been like all pro levels of good? No, so he's not going to get like an A+, but he also hasn't been like bad. He's been really, really solid, really good, and I think is going to be a big time foundational piece for that offensive line moving forward, which given the fact it was a pick number 26, obviously a late first rounder, this was kind of a home run hit, so I'm going to give this one an A-. Then at pick number 25, the Green Bay Packers took Jordan Morgan. This pick was always going to be a bit of a developmental piece. He was somebody who I had high expectations for coming into the season, but I did not think he was going to go ahead of Graham Barton. I don't necessarily know what to think quite yet of Jordan Morgan, because he's had some good moments, but has also just been inconsistent, kind of like Nate Wiggins in a lot of ways. There have been enough flashes, and even though he has been limited with his playing time, there have been some good moments, but I just want to see more. He just hasn't been on the field that much, and when he has been on the field, it just hasn't been that pretty. So I'm going to give this one a C-. I think the Green Bay Packers would have been better off taking Graham Barton, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, pick number 24, where the Detroit Lions took Terrion Arnold. Now, at the time, I thought the pick made a bunch of sense, and so far, it just hasn't really translated for Terrion. I will say he's had some good moments, some really good games, but he's also been at times not that good. Early on in the year, he really struggled with pass interference, and lately he's just kind of been up and down. He'll have a good game here and a bad game here. Most recently versus the Buffalo Bills, the entire defense played bad, and of course Arnold was out there, and a big reason as to why the defense was struggling. This is kind of a tough pick because I know Lions fans really like the guy, so I don't necessarily know if Lions fans would change the pick. At least so far this year, I'm going to give this pick like a C-. And then moving to pick number 23, this pick was actually traded, where the Jacksonville Jaguars took Brian Thomas Jr. The Jacksonville Jaguars have a ton of issues, but this pick was an absolute home run. Brian Thomas Jr. maybe has the argument to be the best receiver of this draft class, though of course there's a bunch of other guys who are pretty good, but Brian Thomas Jr. has been fantastic. He is, quite honestly, one of the only saving graces of this offense that Jacksonville has been putting out there week by week. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is fighting for his life. Now Mac Jones is. The offensive line is terrible, and they've had so many injuries to guys like Evan Ingram and some of their other receiving guys that Brian Thomas Jr. has been forced into a dominant role, and he's lived up to it. He's played very well. This one, maybe not an A+ because he's not quite yet to like a Hall of Fame level or all pro level, which I think some of these guys moving forward in this draft class could become, but he's easily an A in my opinion. Next up at pick number 22 is Quinion Mitchell of the Philadelphia Eagles. This one was also a home run pick. Again, kind of similar to Brian Thomas. Is he a Hall of Fame certified all pro level guy? Probably not quite yet. I mean, maybe he could become that. Same with Brian Thomas, but as of right now, no. So he's not going to be an A+, but he's been a really good corner and has solved a lot of the issues that this Eagles defense has had the past few years, where you had James Bradberry and Darius Slay, and Bradberry was getting picked on every single night. Well, they can't do that to Quinion Mitchell because he's just been really solid and honestly really good. He's had nights where he shut out guys like Terry McLaurin. He's had good games against guys like CeeDee Lamb. I mean, he's been a really good player, and I think moving forward, he's going to be a big part of that defense. It gets an A. Moving to pick number 21, where the Miami Dolphins took Chop Robinson. At the time, I did not like this pick at all, and truth be told, I'm a little bit wrong on this one because as of late, Chop Robinson has been fantastic for the Miami Dolphins, especially with his role being increased, but at the same time, this team did have other needs that they probably should have looked to have addressed with a guy potentially like a Graham Barton, who obviously has worked out really nice for Tampa Bay. With that all said though, given the fact that he was taken by the Dolphins, I think this pick was a really solid pick. I think he will be a really good foundational piece of the defensive line. He has been just a really good player and kind of a menace these past few weeks. So if he's building up to becoming something that I think he can become, then he could be a really good player. It's just been kind of more recently he's been turned on. So we'll have to wait and see if he can sustain that moving into next year. But for now, I'm going to give this one a B. Then moving to pick number 20, where the Pittsburgh Steelers took Troy Fautanu. Unfortunately, we just haven't seen him play. He had a knee injury, I believe, so he's been out for the season. So this one just doesn't get a grade. Then at pick number 19, the LA Rams took Jared Verse, and this one for me is a home run of a home run pick. This guy is maybe going to be a Pro Bowler in his first rookie year. We'll see if he becomes that, but he's been that level of a guy, whether it's getting to the quarterback or stuffing the run and just being such a physical and dominant presence on the football field. He's just had a really good rookie season, and again, it's a home run pick, so this one is going to get an A to maybe even an A+. The only reason why I would even consider an A over an A+ is because I just feel like A+ should really be saved for those like legendary type players. Jared Verse could be that guy, so I'm kind of on the fence. I guess we'll give it an A+. Screw it. Moving over to pick number 18, where the Cincinnati Bengals took Amarius Mims, and Amarius Mims has been good. It was kind of not necessarily rocky, but not necessarily great to start off, but lately he's been a lot better and has maybe shown the ability to be their long-term answer at right tackle. He's a young player. I mean, he only played a handful of games for Georgia, so I kind of expected him to take a little bit longer to understand the game and actually play at a high level, kind of like a Tyler Guyton from Dallas, but he's came in, played pretty well, and now is dominating, so this is a home run pick. Again, it's a small sample size. We still have a lot of time to grow and develop, and he hasn't necessarily been perfect, so I'm not going to give this one like an A+ or an A, but I will go ahead and give this one a B+ because he's been really solid and looks like he's going to be a future foundational piece for this team. Next up, pick number 17, where the Minnesota Vikings took Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner was supposed to be maybe the best defensive player of the draft, but that just hasn't really panned out. Whether it's just been poor play on the field, maybe some injuries here and there, he just hasn't gotten a whole lot of playing time. I'm not going to give up on him because I do think he has the physical tools and also the mental aspect of the game down, so I do think he'll be a good player. It's just a matter of just getting everything down and actually putting it on the field. This one's kind of tough to grade because, again, he just hasn't seen the field that much, and when he has, it's been up and down, not necessarily good, not necessarily bad, but given the fact he hasn't been seeing the field, I'm going to give this one a D+. He just hasn't been on the field, and there were so many really good players right after him. Then at pick number 16, the Seattle Seahawks took Byron Murphy from Texas. Now, Byron Murphy's been good for them. He's been really solid. It's just been injuries that have kind of been slowing him down. He's not necessarily filling up the stat sheet, and his run defense hasn't been particularly great, but at the same time, he's a little bit of an undersized defensive tackle, so you're not really expecting him to be dominant versus the run, but he also hasn't been horrendous against the run. Early on in the year, prior to his first injury, he was playing at a really high level, had the injury, took a little bit to come back, and now is kind of playing again, and has been, kind of quiet, not necessarily making a whole bunch of noise, which is, I guess, a good thing for a defensive lineman, especially defensive tackle. This one's kind of tough to grade because he's a defensive tackle who isn't necessarily filling up the stuff sheet, so unless you're sitting there and watching him on every single play, you're not really going to notice him, but when I have gotten the time to check out his film and watch him play, he's been playing pretty well. The PFF statistics match what my thoughts of him are. He's been good, not great. I would give this one like a B-. Next up, pick number 15, where the Indianapolis Colts took Laiatu Latu, the first defensive player of the draft, and so far he's been pretty good. Now, he hasn't been Jared Verse good, but he's been solid. He has a pass rushing grade of 72.9 and a run defense grade of 64.3 with 4 sacks on the field and 3 forced fumbles. Definitely a productive year. Has had some ups and downs, though. He hasn't been as good as Jared Verse, but I do think he was easily worth the pick. This one's going to get a B+. Next up, Talicia Fuaga for the New Orleans Saints has basically played, whenever healthy, every single snap he can play as a left tackle for the New Orleans Saints. Has been really good. Again, this is somebody who we knew was going to be a dominant run blocker, which he has been so far in the NFL. It was just a matter of, could he be a good pass blocker, which he's been better than maybe expected. Now, he hasn't been perfect. He's given up a couple sacks, has had some penalties, but for the most part has been a really good foundational piece of the offensive line. And I do think moving forward, he's going to continue to be that guy. It just needs a little bit of some fine tuning, and I think in the future he'll be as good as guys like Joe Alt, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit. This one is going to get a solid B. Next up, pick number 13 is Brock Bowers. I don't think I had to say too much about this one. He could potentially win the Offensive Rookie of the Year award if it wasn't for guys like Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, who are playing at very high levels and are, of course, the quarterback. He is quite literally the only bright spot of that Raiders offense. He has been awesome to begin his career. He's going to get an A+. Let's just not overthink it. Next up, Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos. Now, he was taken outside the top 10, so on one hand, maybe you can take that into account given the fact that you took a quarterback pick 12, which can sometimes work out or sometimes not work out. In this case, it has worked out. Bo Nix has been maybe the second best quarterback of this draft class behind somebody we'll talk about later. He's been really good. He looks like the future franchise quarterback for the Denver Broncos. Given the fact that he's a quarterback, which is one of the hardest positions to draft in the NFL, and then you also took him outside the top 10, I'm going to give this one an A+. Not because I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer or even an all-pro player, but just given how hard it is to hit on a quarterback. The Broncos look like they have done it, so I'm going to give that pick an A+. Next up, Olu Fashanu going to the New York Jets with pick number 11. At the time, I really liked the pick, and so far, so good for Olu Fashanu. It hasn't been perfect, but I think moving forward, it's going to be him and hopefully Morgan Moses kind of handling down those tackle positions. Again, hasn't been perfect, has had some penalties, has given up some sacks. His PFF grades are solid, but not necessarily amazing. He's going to be a good player moving forward. He's going to hopefully be a foundational piece of that offensive line. I'm going to give it a B. Next up, pick number 10 goes to JJ McCarthy for the Minnesota Vikings. This one is not going to get a grade because he hasn't played so far in the regular season. Though I will say in the preseason, he looked really good. It's just going to be a matter of actually seeing him on the field, but who knows if he's going to actually end up suiting up for the Minnesota Vikings with how good Darnold has looked. Moving on to pick number 9, where the Chicago Bears took Rome Odunze. Now, I don't necessarily know if they're regretting taking Rome Odunze because he has looked good at times, but at the same time, looking at how bad that offensive line has been this year, and you look at guys like Olu Fashanu and even Brock Bowers, who are taking a few picks later, yet they went out there and took a third receiver, even though they had Keenan Allen and DJ Moore on the roster. At the time, it was kind of a fancy pick, but looking back on it, probably not the best pick in the world. I will say Keenan Allen is maybe not going to be on the team next year, so he will be elevated into a more predominant role on the offense as the number 2 receiver next to DJ Moore. So I do think this grade will improve as time goes on. But as of right now, I'm going to give it like a C+. He hasn't necessarily been a massive focal point of the offense. And given the fact you took him at pick number 9, which is a top 10 pick, you would expect him to be a focal point of the offense. And also given the fact that that offensive line has been atrocious this year and they could really use a Fashanu or maybe another playmaker like Bowers or a Fuanga or those level guys, this pick is obviously just not going to be the greatest pick grade-wise. I'm going to give it like a C+. Moving to pick number 8, where the Atlanta Falcons shocked the world and took Michael Penix Jr. This one is not going to get a grade because he just hasn't played on the field, though that could potentially change in a few weeks. He is being rumored to potentially be the starting quarterback moving forward for the Atlanta Falcons, or at least Falcons fans would like that to happen. We'll have to wait and see because Kirk Cousins has been struggling. He looked okay in preseason and has looked okay when he's been out there on the field, but I don't think he's necessarily the golden savior of this team. I think this team is a little bit too flawed right now, so we'll have to wait and see on Penix. Just for now, it's going to be a no grade. Moving to pick number 7, where the Tennessee Titans took J.C. Latham. Kind of similar to a lot of these tackles, he's been really up and down this year, just really inconsistent, but when he's been good, it's been really good, but when he's been bad, it's been really bad. This is a Titans team that I don't think they're regretting taking J.C. Latham because I do think moving forward, he is going to be their future tackle. It's just going to be a matter of who's going to play opposite of him as the other tackle position. For JC though, given the fact he was taken as a top 10 pick, my expectations for him were to be a little bit better, and so far he just hasn't really lived up to those expectations. Not saying that he's been bad, but I'm also not saying he's been like a generational talent like his pick number 7 value would be, given on to him. With that all said, I don't think he's a bad player. I think he will develop to become a really good tackle for the Titans. I don't think they're regretting the pick. For now, it's going to get a C+, but I'm not worried too much about J.C. Latham and his future. Moving to pick number 6, where the New York Giants took Malik Neighbors, and yeah, this one's going to get an A to maybe even an A+. The only reason why I'm not going to give it an A+ is because Neighbors has had some quiet days and has also had I think he had a concussion early on, and so that also plays into it. But when he's been playing on the field and when the ball is getting thrown to him, he looks like a generational talent in the wide receiver position. It's just going to come down to who's going to be the quarterback for this guy. This pick was a home run hit. He's obviously one of the best receivers in the NFL. When he's getting the ball targeted to him, just get this guy a better quarterback, and I think moving forward, he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver. This one is going to get an A. Next up, we're going to talk about Joe Alt for the LA Chargers. Arguably, maybe has a case to already be a Pro Bowler this year, though I don't think he'll get the nod. This pick gets an A. He's been really solid. He's been perfect alongside guys like Rashawn Slater and all those other guys for the Chargers on the offensive line. He matches the identity of the team. He's physical. He's solid. He just doesn't make mistakes. Yeah, this pick's going to get an A. Moving to Marvin Harrison Jr. with pick number 4, who went to the Arizona Cardinals. This one felt like an obvious pick, but so far it hasn't really worked out quite yet, though I think it will at some points. Marvin Harrison just hasn't really been as productive as you'd like to see. He's had some good games, but has only had 2 games of over 100 yards. And given our expectations for him, it was to be a little bit better than what we've seen from him. Again, we have to give him time. He needs to build chemistry with Kyler, and I just think the offense needs to adjust to his play style. So for now, this one's going to get a C+, but I'm not worried about the talent of Marvin Harrison Jr. because it's still very obvious. We just got to see it on the field. And then moving on to pick number 3, where the New England Patriots took Drake May. Now, early in the year, he wasn't playing, but recently has been the full-time starting quarterback. And even though the team keeps losing, Drake May is looking like an absolute stud. Am I saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer or something like that, or the next Tom Brady? Obviously not. Those are crazy expectations, but he's looked like the guy that this team wanted him to be. He's made some flashy plays while also making a few mistakes here and there. He's developing and growing at the same time, so this is positive movement from the quarterback room for the New England Patriots. I feel really positive that he's going to be a good quarterback moving forward. This one's going to get a B, but I think as time goes on, this one's going to end up being a really good A+ hit. Then at pick number 2, we're going to talk about Jaden Daniels going to the Washington Commanders. I don't think I have to explain this one. He's going to get an A+. Probably going to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year award. Has looked really, really good basically every single week. Hasn't really had a bad week, but he has had some weeks where he hasn't been great. But more often than not, he's playing at a very high level. Most recently, he had a really nice day versus the Tennessee Titans, where he had a really nice day. I think this one's a home run hit. He looks like the future quarterback for the Washington Commanders, and that's really all you can ask for pick number 2. Could be a Pro Bowler, was in conversations for MVP at one point, though he's not in the conversations anymore. This one gets an A+. And then finally, to conclude the video, we have Caleb Williams going to the Chicago Bears. This pick was thought to be a home run, and I do think as time goes on, this pick will age perfectly fine. I think he will be a worthy number 1 overall pick. It's just going to take a little bit more time than maybe some of us thought it was going to take. The offensive line has been pretty bad. The receiving core has been inconsistent, and maybe worst of all, the coaching staff has been incompetent throughout most of the year. The team started off really hot, and then recently has kind of cooled down, even though I do think in recent weeks, Caleb has looked really good outside of the last 2 weeks, but for the most part, he's been improving. So I think this pick will age totally fine. It's just a matter of get this guy an offensive line, get him an offensive head coach, and I think he will be better for it. For now, this one will get a B, but I'm not too worried or panicked about Caleb Williams. But you guys let me know in the comment section below, do you agree or disagree with my picks? And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.